Hello, Jay.
Hello to you. Let me just check that.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right,
you
Alexei.
to thank you to joining this interview. And you uh, I'm conducting interview in the International Research of Features of Gestalt Training in the Gestalt Research Association. And I will ask you some questions, and we will speak about your experience of studying and training Gestalt therapy. Okay.
Wonderful. Okay.
So first questions, where are you from? Where do you live right now? And how old are you?
I
Tricky
was
question.
I was very tricky. I was born in South Africa in Cape Town, which is right at the bottom of Africa. Um, I was born in 1952. That makes me 72 years old now. I will be 73 in a couple of weeks.
Mm,
The I live now in Florida in the States. I lived in South Africa for many years and I emigrated to the States in 2000, end of 2000, um, to Florida, where I work as a Gestalt therapist, mostly doing training and supervision online.
mhm,
I do therapy. My therapy practice is part of it as well.
mhm.
That's separate things. The training, the supervision, and the therapy, all part of my work. I'd say 90% of my work is online
Yeah. Mhm.
at this
And,
time.
Could you tell about how did you become a Gestalt therapist?
Okay. I went to university in South Africa where I was doing a psychology program uh, where master's program in clinical psychology, and the program was in existential psychotherapy and psychoanalysis. That was the theory and the practice. And also a lot of Rogerian stuff was involved in that. I was very interested in all of that. Um, and I was read a book by Fritz and Laura Perls in while I was reading up about object relations theory as a part of the psychoanalytic training. And I was immediately fascinated by this book. I thought it was an amazing book, very different from what I'd read before in object relations. And it really, uh, something went boom in my head, and I thought, this makes sense and was similar enough to existential therapy and psychoanalysis, but but importantly different and exciting. And that was his the view of the um, resistances, how resistances were and how far back they began. And Fritz and Laura is writing about oral resistances, which was part of that book. So I decided to follow up um, what they were calling concentration therapy and looked for somewhere to get some training. And of course, in South Africa, there was nothing. So after a while, I finished my program in South Africa and in the university. And then I decided I'm going to learn more about Gestalt therapy. And I went to uh, a two 1 month training workshops with Irv and Miriam Polster in San Diego in California. And that's where my first real exposure to Gestalt therapy uh, happened. I was pleased and relieved because I found their approach much gentler than what I'd read in books. And I came with a lot of fear, but left with a lot of excitement after those 2 1-month programs. They were very interesting and exciting. That's how I got started in Gestalt. And I went on, a colleague and I invited Bob and Rita and Hunter Beaumont at the time to come to South Africa. And they gave a workshop in Gestalt therapy, and that's when I met Bob Resnick, who became a mentor for me, and I trained with him and Gary Ontiff in Gestalt, GTILA at the time, Gestalt Therapy Institute of Los Angeles. And they were my primary mentors, I would say, Bob and Gary. I learned a lot from them and stayed. There was a split, but I stayed studying with Gatler, became Gatler afterwards. And I stayed with Gatler, did more workshops. I studied. That's where I learned Gestalt therapy. And that's where I learned to become a therapist. Not at the university, after the university, my real training started.
So first you were in that previous institute, yeah? And does it exist now?
GTILA, yes, it does.
Uh-huh.
It's flowering again, I'm pleased to say, and I'm very happy. It's now the Gatler, and there was a split in GTILA. Gatler went one way, and the Pacific Institute, which is Gary and Lynn Jacobs, Jan Rocket, and other people, went with the Pacific one, and the two of them have maintained together the GTILA original program, which is now very much growing and thriving and providing workshops and providing seminars, I should say, for people, online seminars, inviting various people to come. And I think it's a wonderful institute. It's going well. It's, I think, growing. And,
It's very interesting. And could you tell about your experience of learning Gestalt therapy as a student, and maybe how it was structured, and comparing to modern times? Does it big difference?
Yeah, very different. And it still influences the way I teach Gestalt therapy. Way it has developed or evolved, the training is very different from the training I had. Mine was mostly in vivo live training, and we learned through being in therapy groups. We learned the theory and the practice together, which was very vital for me. I needed to learn both at the same time. And I read a lot about Gestalt therapy theory while at the same time working with Gary, with Bob, with other therapists who came to the GTILA workshops and later the Gatler workshops and were training us as participants. And we got both together. The theory and the practice were inseparable. There wasn't a section where you go for a year, which many people do now. And the first year is seen as you don't learn any theory, you just go to therapy and you do therapy and you're in a group. And I think I would not have survived to 1 month. I would have left. I just would not have appealed to me. I need this as well as the heart. And I'm very happy that I had that opportunity. And I teach the same way. The therapy and the theory must, for me, be integrated in the here and now, in the work as we're doing it. And that's the best way that I have found to learn and to teach.
Mhm.
Now,
And
that's how.
thank you. And who is Gestalt therapist and how would you define this role?
Who is a Gestalt therapist?
Yeah.
Well, it's not for me to say who is a Gestalt therapist. Many people claim to be Gestalt therapists, and that, of course, is their right. We do not have a set of rules or definition of a Gestalt therapist that
So
is
actually, I try to find.
acceptable to everybody.
Uh-huh.
Um,
I try to find this definition, and that's why I'm asking different.
Well, I follow the general idea that a Gestalt therapist is working the basic principles with the basic principles of awareness, the fundamental uh, um, anchors of Gestalt therapy are in field theory, phenomenology, and dialogue. Those three are the most fundamental theoretical elements that provide the understanding of the situation of the client and of life, of existence. Some therapies that are very good, but they don't use all three of those elements, but I would not consider them Gestalt therapy. And some elements that people claim is Gestalt therapy, but they don't follow, they don't have it. It's not Gestalt therapy. It may be very good, though, whatever they're doing for certain things. But for me, Gestalt therapy involves those three fundamental, an understanding and an implementation of the interventions that flow from that understanding of existence.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that makes Gestalt therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamental awareness, contact, here and now work is all part of Gestalt therapy. That's what a Gestalt therapist is doing or focusing on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Quite structured definition. And could you tell how is Gestalt therapy training generally structured and what are its advantages and limitations?
Well, I'm not responsible for the structures that different institutes have. My understanding is that a lot of institutes in Europe are structured in similar ways. They have a first year which is just for therapy, and there's very little theoretical input. And then there are a couple or 3 years of therapy and practice, theory and practice put together over a period of 2 to 3 years, which they call level 2 training. And then after that, the level 3 training is what they refers to as people who want to do supervision or learn supervision. It's a very formal structure that that people accept. For many years, I did not know when people did not understand when people said, "Well, I finished level 2." And I think, "What are you talking about? What's level 2?" But they meant that they'd finished all the formal training and now could be certified by the Institute as having completed the training in Gestalt therapy. Some of them had exams that went with it or some kind of assessment. So their certification was in competence, and some of the certifications were in attendance. And of course, there's a difference between the two. But people seem to value those certificates a lot and spend a lot of time, money, and effort to obtain those certificates and to get them validated by other institutes.
Mhm.
And in Europe, for example, there are the EAGT, for example, has become an umbrella organization that is now seen by many in Europe as essential to belong to that and to be certified by them in order to be able to be called Gestalt therapists. Obviously, that's just a convention. There's nothing legal or nothing
Yeah, I understand.
else about it. It's just a conventionally accepted thing. And many people don't need it and don't want it and aren't interested in it, and that's fine.
Mhm.
I am a member of EAGT. I'm a supervisor in EAGT. Not because I think, mostly because many people want those training hours because their institutes demand it,
Mhm.
but not for no other reason, really.
Mhm. Mhm. And uh, are you in some institute, a trainer of some institute or institutes?
Yes, I am a trainer. As far as I know, I'm a trainer only in Gatla.
Mhm.
With other institutes, I'm an invited guest. I wouldn't say
Mhm.
that they would call me their trainer,
Mhm.
uh, but I'm an invited guest, and I return again and again to different institutes, and some of them, but purely in a guest faculty situation,
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
as a trainer, not as a formal trainer.
So, what do you think advantages and limitations of Gestalt training?
The advantages and limitations of Gestalt training or Gestalt therapy.
Of Gestalt training, I mean, how people learning Gestalt therapy, is it maybe has some advantages comparing to formal education or another kind of education, or maybe it has some limitations.
It's a hard one and probably get me into a lot of trouble with some people. Okay. It's a hard one to answer. I mean, without getting into trouble.
Why?
Well,
It's looks like
I,
simple question.
I am quite critical of a lot of the training in Gestalt therapy.
So,
I don't, you know, I understand it's very formal. It's extremely expensive. Um, I think it's exclusionary in many ways. And it runs it for me against so much that Gestalt therapy philosophy actually claims. And I find that difficult to reconcile the goals of the Gestalt therapy philosophy with how the training is has evolved. Sometimes they feel incompatible. The training feels very hierarchical, not very democratic, um, and it's problematic in some ways for me. Um, Having said that, I still think that Gestalt therapy, not so much the training, but the advantages of Gestalt therapy are enormous over other models. I mean, as long as there's no better model, I'm going to stick with Gestalt therapy. It's the best model of rehabilitation and therapy that I know, and I don't know all of them, but it's the one that really sings to me and speaks to me and uh, gives me sense of hope for a therapy. I don't even like the word therapy. It's too connected with a medical model, but intervention and rehabilitation, helping people on their journey, existential journey, to find their home, to leave home, their home that is toxic to go on a journey to find a new place where they belong, and sometimes to recognize when it's time to leave and move on to the next place. Gestalt therapy is an amazing process model to capture all the nuances of existence that are important.
Mhm.
And it's an amazing model, which is so different from all the other models that we know. Even its theory of change is unique. Every humanistic theory of change is not like the Gestalt model. And that makes Gestalt therapy not a humanistic therapy. Humanistic therapies are let's master things. Let's become better people. And Gestalt saying, no, you're fine the way you are, but be yourself. Find out how to be authentic and live an authentic life. Stop trying to be someone else. Uh, whereas all these other models are about how can I change myself? How can I be better? How can they
Mhm.
don't make sense from a Gestalt perspective.
Thank you. Okay. And you're trainer of Gotland. Why did you choose this particular institute? And
I love the way you put the question. No, I did not choose Gatler. Gatler chose me.
mm,
There's a background story to it, which I don't think this is the place to share it. But at one point, I went to LA with the idea of being part of their faculty. Bob and Gary had invited me when they were still GTI LA,
mm,
and decided with my young child and my wife that LA was not going to be a place that I wanted to raise a kid. And with great regret, I had to decline their very generous invitation. But they supported me enormously in continuing and certifying me and giving me so many opportunities that I became part of the faculty by I don't know. I guess they just thought there was something I could offer and kept me on and trained me and helped me and aided my growth enormously into becoming a better trainer, a better person. And I've stayed with them out of a sense of both gratitude. They gave me so many opportunities. And now, as a member of the faculty, I try very much to, in English, we say to pay it forward. You know, there was the opportunities that they gave me. I now do my very, very best always to, if I'm invited to do something, to pay it forward, give other people sponsorships, give other people opportunities. Um, and I don't care so much for the hierarchies and all the other stuff.
mm,
And I learned that very much in the Gatler and in the GTI LA experience. They were not hierarchical in the same way. Their model of training changed from year to year to year based on feedback from participants. And they took us as participants very seriously in our feedback. And we did some big changes, or they did some big changes based on feedback. And Gatler now, I think, has built that into its way of thinking, that the faculty are not the final arbiters or the only arbiters of what is good training. but the participants have a 50%, it's a 50-50 deal. What the participants feel is good training is as important as what the faculty need to provide for good training. So I don't know if I'm answering your question,
Yeah.
but that's how they chose me. I didn't really choose Gatla. I found a home there. I will say that. But I found many homes in many other institutes as a guest, which I'm very extremely grateful for those
Mm.
opportunities.
Mhm. Very interesting and touching story. And now I want to speak about your students and what difficulties do your students most often face during their training, and how do you support them in overcoming these challenges?
Well, again, my first reaction is, what difficulties do the students face? My immediate reaction is, well, why don't you ask the students, not me?
I will, I will, and I
Good.
did,
I'm
because
not.
I want to see this picture from different
I,
sides.
I really. I'm not in the position to say what difficulties they face. If I were a student, the difficulties that I would face would be the ones I've mentioned before. The hierarchical nature of the training, the authoritarianism that I see in many institutes, functioning as ways to define what is therapy, and you're a good therapist or you're a bad therapist. I mean, I think those judgments are so damaging, and some students come away so wounded from training that we lose, I think, sometimes some good people because of a rigidity that is in the system, that is intended to be useful and good, but the impact is not. Um, I see people getting hurt in the training at times,
Mhm.
very not just a few times, but I see that
Mhm.
a lot. I don't like that. But this is the kind of thing that gets me into trouble. But I'm not going to mention institutes, so it's fine.
You
Um,
don't need to. I don't ask about some specific names. I just ask general experience.
okay, so just say the question again. I'm sorry.
I think you answer already that the main problem student faced is they hurt in by judging are they good therapist or not. And the next question is uh, about ethical. What ethical questions arise most frequently during training?
Okay, it's a great question. In the last few years, information regarding ethics has become more and more included in the training program, and I think that's important. Many years ago, there was hardly any discussion of ethics um, for the professional. What are professional ethics? There was an assumption that everybody knew what it was, but no real effort to um, clarify what was ethically seen as the gold standard of ethical practice. But then ethical practice also uh, is not simply following what the conventional idea is. I think it's very important to actually have trainings on ethics, and that does not mean lectures. That means that people get, as part of a training group, to experience and share and learn what are ethics, and what do they mean about ethics? What makes ethics important? And what do we think we're even doing when we say we're doing therapy? And some people don't see an ethical component in that. They think it's a technique or a technology, and it's a real big mistake. They don't know an answer to that question. They don't even ask that question. Um, and here we have a real problem that I think that some people still strongly believe that therapy is a process that is free of cultural influences. In other words, to put it bluntly, it's not that therapy is not political. Of course, it's political. It's always been a political process, and you cannot exclude it from your practice, awareness of it, and the very idea that we are neutral, at best neutral, when it comes to certain situations is simply laughable. It's just some people truly believe that and teach that and expect that students will be comfortable with that. And again, this is the kind of thing that'll get me into trouble. I think that therapy is by definition political. You cannot claim to be doing therapy and not understand that what we call therapy in this situation or in a situation 100 years ago or in 100 years' time, that the concept and process of doing a therapy will be changed by the politics of the situation. It is as much a product of politics as it is of any other cultural situation, and it's not neutral.
Mhm.
So here we have ethics, which is not something which is stagnant and fixed, but something that is alive and changing and needs to be um, reviewed and revisited and revised again and again and again. Nothing is fixed forever. Everything is in constant change, and that includes our understanding of ethics and what it means to be a therapist.
Mhm. And what are the biggest changes? What are the biggest challenges you personally face as a trainer?
Personal challenges?
Yeah, as a trainer.
My health, traveling.
Uh,
That's not what you meant. I think one of the hardest things as a guest trainer is the lack of ongoing continuity and access to seeing how the people that I'm working with over time, seeing them over time, and 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 just enjoying how to see how they are growing in that process from novice to talented, incredible people who are just well-rounded human beings, and it just gives me such joy. The hardest thing is losing connection with them and not being able to maintain that ongoing relationship and watching how they just become these incredible people doing amazing stuff. I miss that. That's the hardest thing for me. That's the biggest challenge for me. Working with teaching, I just love it. I enjoy it. I don't always do it very well. Some of my students might say, "Well, I'm a terrible teacher, maybe at times," but generally, I'm happy with the feedback I get. But the hardest thing is missing that contact. You make the contact, you see them. I see them. I love that work. And then you say goodbye, and what the fuck? They're gone.
Yeah.
Some of them keep contact, and that's lovely. I really appreciate that. Some of them don't.
Mhm.
That's the hardest thing for me,
Mhm.
personally.
Yeah. Thank you. Uh, is there anything in the current programs you would like to change or reconsider?
In which current programs? What do you mean?
Of teaching Gestalt therapy?
I'm generally guided by what the Institute wants me to teach. I will teach different facets of Gestalt therapy. So I don't get to pick and choose. When I do get to pick and choose, I usually prefer to teach clinical stuff like the awareness process, the clinical phenomenology of pre-contacting, contacting, final contacting, the nuts and bolts of of the therapy, getting in there and getting your hands dirty inside the engine and just seeing how we can understand how the theory and the practice works. I love that part most. And sometimes I'm invited to teach the more abstract stuff, phenomenology, the field theory or dialogue. I'm not dismissing it. I think they're fundamental. I think if you don't know that, you can't get into and understand how to work with the awareness process. Or you have to have that other stuff to be able to apply it in clinical phenomenology. You must know that other stuff. So I teach that too, but I prefer the clinical phenomenology.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mm.
Mhm. And how do you see the development of Gestalt therapy in the nearest future?
Oh, more trouble.
Why?
Well, I think I see some developments. Some of them good, some of them I think are dead ends, but that's okay. Other people, it's fine. It doesn't change how I see what I do. Um, Over time, Gestalt therapy has moved from concentration therapy to the classical uh, model, mostly molded by Fritz with his individualistic stuff. Then we moved on to a more rounded uh, personal theory rather than an individualistic model, to a community-based understanding of the importance of relationship um, in the ontological primacy of relationship. In other words, before the individual, and even before there are two, there is one relationship. And this has been a real big contribution from field theory primarily, and then dialogue. This idea of the primacy of the the I-thou relationship, that this is the ontological ground of our human experience, out of which comes the individual experiences and the I-it relationships and stuff like that. This is very difficult for some people to get, in my opinion. They don't get it and they struggle with it. But it's fundamental for me in my understanding of Gestalt therapy. Then we moved on from this idea which I see as a relational Gestalt therapy, which is what I'm talking about. But then it became a thing, relational Gestalt therapy, which has become focused predominantly on the I-thou relationship, as far as I can see, on the id of the situation, working with shame, which is a relatively new addition to therapy and Gestalt therapy in the 70s. Started up with Kohut and with Lasch, Christopher Lasch, talking about narcissism and shame and stuff. And then it became a kind of a treatment possibility for therapy, which previously those conditions that were defined by shame were seen as untreatable. They were not neuroses which were treatable. They belonged to another axis in the DSM, axis 2. And so it was put aside. And these guys came along and said, no, actually, therapy can work. And it's a different therapy. It's a longer term therapy when you work with that. So that brought in a new phase of opportunity for development in Gestalt therapy, which has been exploited in a good way, has been developed in a very good way. The difficulty where I'm having some struggle with it now is that it seems to me that this particular way of viewing clinical phenomenology as primarily belonging in the area of shame and working with shame has become too limiting. It limits Gestalt therapy unnecessarily, in my opinion. And the clinical phenomenology of working with anxiety and guilt and other aspects of the awareness continuum are being overshadowed by the, in my opinion, overemphasis on pre-contacting stuff. And I'm not minimizing it. The pre-contacting stuff is incredibly important, but it's not all of Gestalt therapy. It's one very important aspect, as is the old classical stuff on neuroses and working with ego functions, as is the work with guilt and final contacting and stuff like that. They're all important, and they're all different manifestations of pathologies of awareness that require a broader respect for the range of Gestalt therapy that Gestalt therapy offers, and not just be limited to the pre-contacting stuff. It always seems to come back.
Yeah, but you're saying about history of development.
Well, I'm talking up to now.
Up to now. But what
That's
about
the
future?
Oh, I can't tell the future. I'm not.
I don't want you to predict the future, but where are we going?
I hope that we will find a balance again. And I think the future of Gestalt therapy has shifted to a much more clear understanding of the significance of the importance of the situation as the fundamental object, if you want to use that word, of Gestalt therapy practice. To understand the situation is fundamental to working in Gestalt therapy, rather than anything else. It's moving that way where I, for example, have often described existence as a situated event of relatedness, a situated event of relatedness. And that captures for me all the range of what Gestalt therapy can do. But it starts with the situation. I forget the name of the book that has become very popular now. It's my memory. But I think people are beginning to respect the situation is more than just pre-contact, is more than just contacting, is the whole situation within which growth happens. And to take that, to understand that, is to understand existence, human existence. You can't just reduce it again to one part. It's an anti-reduction. Gestalt is an anti-reductionistic model, and I'm scared that it gets too reductionistic. I like the idea that in the future, hopefully, we will move more fully into the significance of understanding the role and the meaning of situation.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing your experience and thoughts. It was very fruitful
I
dialogue
don't know about that, Alexei. We'll
for
see.
me.
But thank you for
So,
the chat. You made me think about a few things, and I'd be interested to hear it again and probably have some cringe-worthy moments. But if you need this, if you think it's useful, you can use it.
yeah, of course, it was very interesting for me, and I'm sure it's very useful. So thank you. Now we
And
will
thank you too. All right.